All right, so we're here to talk about this hilt from Starfall Sabers. This is a commission of 2 that I got from Nick for an individual customer. This one is called Exile. And so let us go down to the table. We'll talk about some of the install specifics, the components. These are both really high end, and the client wanted to kind of just push the envelope. So we have a very detailed greeblie resin chassis painted up to look really cool and match some of the aesthetics. We've got a couple extra neopixel programming things going on. So let's drop down to the table. We'll check it out. We'll go over a few things, and then we'll hop back out. We'll demonstrate a few things with the blade in, and then we'll wrap it up. Thanks for checking it out. All right, so we're here to talk about the Exile hilt for Starfall Sabers. This came to me as a commission of 2. This is the second of that. And with both of these, I did a kind of an all-out greeblie resin chassis. I will say that this shroud was one that Nick had commissioned me to etch with a whole bunch of other things. And so with that in mind, this is a static chassis with a removable battery, and the customer requested a custom wrap on the battery. So we'll check that out. And what I did was I went ahead and used part of my design to kind of mirror that shroud in the battery wrap. So to get to everything, we've got our grip set screw here, our blade retention set screw here, and then we have our neopixel connector. And this is a different Allen key size, but just know you do not want to mess with this because this is holding the neopixel emitter in, and we don't want to mess that up. So to take our grip off, we unscrew the grip set screw. Make sure you're fully backed off so you don't scratch up. And then we'll pull the grip off to reveal the chassis. And some extra greeblie work that Nick did. So this is some interesting thin neck design with a copper section and a crystal chamber. And then I did a kind of heavily detailed greeblie chassis with 2 neopixel strips on either side. And then I printed a translucent resin diffuser so that it looks a little bit more blended together instead of individual pixels. I don't know if this is focusing. And then I did a little bit of rub and buff and a little bit of a paint job so we can see in the detail. Oops, sorry, I'm mirrored. In some of the detail work, you got some little faux resistors and then some faux buttons and engine part looking things, and yeah, so high detailed. So this sports Proffi V2 high-amp kill switch, 28 millimeter bass speaker from Saberbay. In the crystal chamber, as with the other hilt that we did, we have a Shtok 11 neopixel circular array, and then we've got this blade plug. So we'll take the blade plug out by undoing the blade set screw here, and then to reveal a Shtok V3 emitter. And then there is a separate blade style for each of the strips, for the crystal chamber, for the inner and outer circle of the emitter, and then the main blade. So there are 6 blade styles on the config. So, and then here's our custom wrapped battery. I don't know how well that's going to show up with all of the reflectivity, but you can sort of see the old Jedi insignia, and then some of the filigree work. And I don't know if that's showing up on camera. And then Starfall Sabers. And again, probably too reflective to see it. But you can take the battery out if you need to replace it. And then you can see we've got our positive and negative terminals clearly indicated with embossed patterns, as well as the Starfall logo in the tray there, but Springside is your negative. So when you do go to put the battery back in, because we just have a press fit with some glue to hold the resin chassis in, we kind of want to grip the chassis itself so that we're not pulling it out. You don't need a whole lot of pressure, just make sure you're not yanking on the chassis itself. And then to start it up, we can hit the kill switch. So we get our boot sound. We've got an animation on the strips in the off state, as well as a pulsing on the crystal chamber, and the inner ring pulsing. And then if we ignite, so with the shroud facing to the left, up is power and bottom is aux. These are copper Phil Ginnis or Kalymian Custom Sabers switches. I will say that the aux takes a little bit more of a button press than the power, and that's just the nature of him replacing these plungers. So when we power on, we get that outer ring lighting up, and it will respond to blaster blocks and clashes, as will the crystal chamber. And depending on the preset, the accent strips as well. And so the client requested a little bit of a variation in on and off colors, but for the most part, the crystal and the emitter will mimic the blade color for each preset that Nick intended for his fonts. This does sport the Starfall sound font collection. And then the client requested some additional programming. So I've included the entire set of free grayscale fonts. And I was limited to a degree with the number of blade styles I could do because we have all these accents. So I was able to get 2 extra blade styles that come from grayscale for the first 2 of the fonts. And I believe that's Coda and Mercenary. I could have that wrong. And then the rest of them are just some sort of variation of the Starfall presets. Now, I did use OS 6 when I created the blade styles for the Starfall collection. So there are options for preons and post-offs, as well as ignition and power-up effects. So the configs on the SD card, edit mode is accessible either through button presses, which I find to be cumbersome, or you can plug with a 90-degree cable this into your computer, go to the web USB portal, and then there's a whole lot more intuitive interface because you have the ability to select on and off colors, as well as clash, lightning block, stab, melt, all those colors. If you do that from a button presses, you're going to start to get deep into the menu. And again, I just find that cumbersome. So I won't be going over that in this video. There is a printout with instructions for the client. And on the last page, there's a link. This does use FET263 prop file. So the link will go to that web page for the 2-button effects. So yeah, you can read up on how to do all that. But essentially, the blade styles I think I've chosen are pretty good. So we'll just go through a couple examples here of the on and off states. So this one has a sound reactive thing for the PLI strip. So the louder the saber gets, the more illuminated the pixels get. Yep.
Hero's Journey.
And we do have gesture controls. So twist on, I just used a button press, but twist off. And then we also have thrust on, which is just a horizontal kind of shove. If you use the gesture control to turn on or off the saber, you will enter battle mode. Battle mode just means you don't need to press a button to engage a lockup. Ruin does have a preon. The only way to get the preon is to tap power. If you use a gesture control, you bypass it.
Reconcile.
Actually, let's go back. If we want to go back in fonts, we just point the saber down, hit the aux button, and then any other direction the saber's pointing, the aux button will go forward. But let's check that out real quick. Oops. We got another sound reactive, but this one on the accents looks more like fire, because this is an unstable blade style. So when you're ready to use the saber, you want to put the grip back on, and you want to make sure you're as parallel as possible so that we don't damage the chassis. There will be a little bit of resistance when you start to get towards the end. So just keep in mind that it's tight, but it's tight for a reason. And then we just want to make sure we align all the set screws. That's how Nick intended this grip to go on. So that we tighten that up. And then we can hit power or use our gesture controls. So yeah, and then when we're ready, we can put this up on the shelf and hit the kill switch. I did program all the accents to turn off after 5 minutes so that we save battery life. So if you leave it on, it doesn't have deep sleep, but it will kind of conserve power. But once the lights go off, you'll have to press a button to wake the saber back up. It will not respond to gesture controls. So put the blade plug back in. This was a 7/8 blade. It's programmed for a 32-inch length, just like all of Nick's sabers, unless requested otherwise. So yeah, thanks for checking it out. We will go over some more functions, a couple more blade styles with the blade actually in. Okay, so we've talked about the chassis, the electronics, some of the caveats going on with the programming, and let's just go over a few functions with the blade in. So we did talk about the various neopixel accents that are in on and off states, but you won't see that with the blade in. So to advance fonts, we use the your left, my right is aux, and this is power. Or basically, if the shroud is facing you or the shroud is to the outside of your hand, up is power and down is aux, if you choose to do it this way, so that when you're wielding it, it's like this, it's the vice versa. This is now aux and this is now power, okay? So you just turn it on. So we do have gesture controls, but right now we're in default mode. So to engage lockups, you'll hold a button and then clash the saber. But if we don't, we just clash the saber, we're gonna get clashes, and there'll be different animations. But if we hold either aux or power and clash, we're gonna get a lockup. Now you can move it around all you want. It's a little bit responsive until we let go. Now the same goes for tip effects. So melt is when you're horizontal. So we'll hold melt. Oops. There we go. So the longer you hold it, the more animated it gets. And if you do rotate it around, you'll get a little bit of a different color until you let go. So if we're vertical or hilt's pointing down, now we're gonna get a drag effect. So, oops, I'm not holding it very well. There we go. So that's regular mode. Now, if we use a gesture control, twist on or thrust on, we'll be in battle mode and we don't have to hold a button. So now we're in battle mode. So a clash is now gonna stay in a lockup. You move it around a little bit, but you want to pull away to disengage that lockup. Same goes again, like for the melt effect. Okay. You move it around a little bit, but if you pull away, you'll get out of it. And then same goes for drag. Okay. You can twist off. Now, the same thing goes for thrust on, which is a horizontal push or pull. So, okay. So as long as the saber's horizontal, then you'll get that. Let's move to a different preset. Okay, to engage the track, we're gonna hold the power button with the saber off for a second. And then same to turn it off. You can turn the track on and off with the saber ignited. You just have to hold the saber vertically. So let's do that real quick. Okay, so if we're vertical, hold the power to start the track. Now you can do all kinds of stuff. For vertical, we can turn it off again. If we're in any other position, holding power for a second is a force effect. So some of these Starfall font collections will either have quotes or sound effects or a mix of the two. So I think this one has a mix of the two. So if we do that, we're going to get an unstable blade for a few seconds. I actually have to hold it, not press power. So hold it for a second. So that's a quote, right? But the animation only lasts for like 3 seconds. Font can go on for however long the font goes on. So we'll turn that off. Go to another font. Okay. And I will say, I mentioned this on the other Saber install, or the other Saber video. Each of the Starfall font presets do have some extra options in edit mode. I'm not going to go over edit mode, but you can turn on and off some pre-ons, post-op, or ignition effects for each of those fonts. But it's going to be a lot easier to do from a desktop computer, because with all of the blinkies going on, you have to go into each blade. So there's 6 blades on this one, and then enter into, the individual colors, the on color, the off color, the blast color, the lightning block color, yada, 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 which I find to be cumbersome because you have to keep going in deeper and deeper into menus, and you have to remember which number you're on. It doesn't tell you the name of the blade, it just tells you the number. So, but anyway, this one had a little bit of an ignition effect. So, all right. So, Ruin is one that does have a pre-on in the default mode. If you use this to duplicate presets for other fonts that you had in the future, the default is a pre-on. Now, a pre-on has to have a sound, so if the font you use doesn't have a pre-on.wave, it won't do it. But the only way to get it is to hit the button for power. If you use a gesture control, you're going to bypass. So let's do that real quick. So this one's pretty short pre-on, just does a little animation there. But if we twist on, we're going to bypass that little flame and just go straight into our ignition.
Reconcile.
So to get to color change, I will present the caveat that color change mode on these sabers with all these extra accents will override the accent colors as well. It's basically, you just jump into color change, so any of these effects will also change. It doesn't know that you just want to change the main blade. But to get to it, we turn the saber on, we hold aux and tap power. You'll get that notification. Now if we rotate, we can change colors. To accept, we hit power. To revert, we hit aux. So I'm going to revert because all of these are intended to have a certain color.
Revert.
And you'll hear that. But again, I can't show you without the grip off, but all of the colors will change at the same time. So the crystal chamber and the strips will all start changing because it doesn't know that. So in order to do that, you need to get into edit mode. Again, I'm not going to cover that. I've got instructions. I really recommend you plug the saber in to go over all of it, because you're only editing the main blade. You're not editing the clash, the off colors, or the retraction colors, or the post-op. So there's all these extra features. It's really intuitive to do it at the web USB portal. But anyway, so moving on, I'm going to go through the rest of these presets and then show you that we do have some grayscale fonts on here as well. Cornhorn is the only one with color change direct, so it will not go into the color wheel. It's just going to swap between 2 colors, white for the main style and then purple, and that will reflect in the crystal as well. The accents will just do whatever the accent color is to start matching. So again, turn the power on. Okay, hold aux, tap power. And I don't know how well that shows up on screen, but it went from white to purple. And we go back from white to purple. We don't get into the color wheel. It's just that. So the last two presets are grayscale fonts. Now I mentioned this in the other video, but I used the preset style that, or the blade style that came from Sam for those two fonts. Now they're built on OS 5, so they do not support edit mode functions. You cannot change them. You can change the accent, so the crystal and the two strip colors, but you can't change the blade effect colors and all that stuff. There's a lot more in depth going on, and it doesn't have the little variables that will do it. So it'll act like it wants to change the colors, but the moment you hit accept, it just goes back to whatever it was programmed to. But it will accept changes to the other colors. So if that's to your liking, great. If not, I highly recommend copying one of the Starfall presets to those fonts. Again, those are presets 1 through 7. So 8 and 9 are the grayscale. I'm sorry, 0 through 7. I don't know why it does that, but and then 10 is the battery level indicator. So let's just demonstrate that real quick. Oops, forgot. We're still on Cornhorn. So that little announcement is now we're on Coda, I believe. So it had that pre-on. It's got this particular blade style. And then on Mercenary, we also have a pre-on and a post-off and some interesting swing effects. I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but we get sort of a variation in color. Yeah, it's not going to show up on camera, but we get a little bit of a flicker in color, and then it's kind of rotating between certain shades of yellow. So again, color change is not going to work for this. So this is now moving on to another grayscale font, but I used a Starfall preset. And again, I turned on the pre-on and a post-off. So let's demonstrate that. So this is like the Starfall blade style, the red, right? But it had a pre-on, whereas the Starfall font did not have a pre-on, right? And then we have a post-off. Of an emitter cooldown, right? So I did that, a little bit of programming for you, but again, those features come with each of the Starfall presets. There's a little bit of extra functions, and you can only access those through either edit mode on the Saber, which I highly discourage because it gets confusing. But if you do the web USB, you can turn on pre-on post-offs. There's some ignition power-up effects. So on some of them, you'll see a spark tip or a ripple, or I have the ability to just turn those functions off. It's called disable. So you'll have up to 2 or 3 variations, but because there's so many variations for each of the ignition, retraction, pre-on, post-off, you can get hundreds of different combinations. So, but these will respond to color change. But again, it's going to change all of the accent colors as well. So if you like those accent colors, or like I mentioned, you asked for these to not all be the same color, the only way for them to not all be the same color is to not use color change. I don't normally have to say all this, but because you requested some extra programming, I'm just bringing it up. So I highly recommend edit mode on the computer, not on the Saber. But yeah, so we'll go through a couple more presets. So it has a very long retraction sound.
Hello, Zuko here. Crispity.
All right, so I'm going to skip to the battery level indicator.
Battery level.
Okay, so now we've got this little bump that shows how much the charge is. You can see we're coming down here into the yellow territory. So once we're getting a little bit past this lower percentage, we should start hearing the speaker crackle. Thankfully right now we're not, but again, on the main blade, this will start from like a green or a blue out here at the tip for fully charged, and it'll get down to red. On the accent, I don't remember if it's just on the crystal or if it's on the strips as well, but that one will go from green to red. So if you just had the blade out and you had it on the shelf, you could do that. Or you can do the color change function in the off state is a battery level. So if we hold aux tap power,
battery level 33%.
it'll tell you how much it's charged. So we're at 33%. So that's actually pretty good for not distorting at 33%. I've had some other sabers start to crackle down at this low. Yeah, so I'll try to charge this before this gets out to you. This does have the custom battery wrap here on this one. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Again, I'm not covering all of those extra features. I've got a printout for you, and then you can go look at all of Fernando's videos. He goes in depth on all that stuff. I highly recommend watching any video that covers the web USB interface, which is where you plug your saber into your desktop computer. You go to a website and then you tell it to connect to your Proffi. It'll pull up all your presets, and then you'll be able to change the tracks. And then once you click on the little cogwheel, you can edit all of the various blade styles. And again, it starts off, well, you got 6 on this one, you got 8 on the other one. So main blade, emitter inner, emitter outer ring, the crystal chamber, the 2 strips. So each side, you can actually program each side to do something differently. I've chosen to have them all the same. But yeah, you can go crazy with your heart's content with on color, off color, ignition color, retraction color, blast color, lightning block color, yada, yada, yada. So it's way easier than doing it on the hilt. So yeah, hope you enjoyed these sabers. These came out really cool. There was a whole lot of frustration though on some of them. But I'm really happy how these came out, and I hope you are too. So thanks for checking it out.